Selfloss is a slow-paced adventure game inspired by Slavic folklore, full of atmospheric environments, magical creatures and memorable set pieces. You play as the old healer Casimir, and with the aid of your boat, you are in search of a ritual that can cure your soul wound. Along the way, you will meet many strange characters and terrifying monsters, and only with the light of your magic staff will you be able to fight the mysterious affliction taking over the world, called miasma. During your journey, you will also have to enact the ritual of self-loss a couple of times. This is a ritual that will heal the wounds of those who have lost loved ones. So you can imagine, this game was an emotional rollercoaster ride from start to finish. First off, I would like to mention that the very first trailer of this game showed footage of a lot of deleted events and characters sadly. I remember some footage of Casimir fighting giants for example, but these fights aren't in the final version, and it was a small disappointment. I still enjoyed this game a lot though. It's definitely a unique experience that you won't forget soon, mainly because it has such an interesting world for you to explore. The combat, however, is not that riveting to be honest. You will have to freeze enemies first with your staff, and then you can hurt them with your sickle, which is a pretty slow attack, and it sometimes misses as well. It also can become a bit tedious, because the hit registration of your light beam could use some tweaks. I had multiple moments where I wasn't able to hit a target, even though my light beam was right on top of them. I did really like the overall gameplay though. While the combat didn't really manage to impress me, the puzzle solving and the traversal by boat or by foot were a lot more enjoyable. Nothing is overly difficult or hard to understand. Most puzzles can be solved in a few minutes if you have a good memory, and many traversal challenges are just covering yourself from incoming attacks that can insta-kill you if you aren't well hidden enough. The controls can be a bit finicky sometimes, especially when you have to push objects in the right spots with your boat. And I had a few instances I got stuck behind some objects or some edges, but it was a pretty solid experience overall. I do have to mention two instances that almost made me lose my mind because of some polishing issues. There is this sequence where you have to follow guiding statues in stormy weather while sailing your boat. But some of these statues guide you into the wrong direction because they fire their guiding beam way too quickly. So I ended up sailing back and forth, and eventually I had to take a long break because I got motion sickness after a while. Another instance was this door puzzle where you have to do two steps. The first one is to line up the pieces correctly, and the other one is to place the objects in the right spot. But I still have no clue why it opened up eventually. I was pretty sure the image on the door was correct, and that's why I ended up just randomly switching the objects with each other at least a few times, and all of a sudden it opened. To this day, I still don't know why it took me so long, but I thought it's worth mentioning if you are planning to play this game. There are also some boss fights in this game, and I must say they are pretty decent considering the whole game is pretty slow paced and the combat mechanics leave a lot to be desired. I like their overall design and I really appreciated the tension they added to the overall gameplay. Most of their attacks were pretty easy to dodge, and it was quite clear how to defeat them or where their weak spots were, but I just really enjoyed the spectacle of it. The game has not a lot of replay value sadly. It's divided into 5 chapters with each their own atmospheric setting and their own quest. Other than just following the main storyline, you can explore a bit and collect scrolls that give you a bit more backstory about certain creatures or just some overall lore. And you can activate these runic stones that will power up the light beam of your staff, so you can freeze enemies faster. Collecting all of these added a lot more time to my overall playthrough, and if you would like to solve a bit more puzzles and are interested in the lore of this game, I would highly recommend to try to 100% it, which took me 7 hours to achieve. So in general, Selfloss is definitely a very unique experience. Some creatures or events reminded me a bit of Bramble the Mountain King, but that's not a bad thing in my opinion. It could use some polishment for sure though. The light beam needs some tweaks and the controls can be a bit rough at some places, especially during some boat sections for example. But other than the really bland combat and the few instances I have mentioned before, this game was really enjoyable and for sure worth your time if you love adventure games. It's really slow paced and it doesn't have a lot of replayability, but at the same time it's also a really unique and memorable experience with a very emotional story. So I can't recommend it enough if it looks to be right up your alley. So be ready to embark on an emotional journey full of Slavic inspired myths and events, and find out how to get rid of this world's mysterious affliction, so you can help yourself and others with the ritual of self-loss.